You might be doing great work, but you're still struggling. And part of the reason is because your boss is not giving you what you need to succeed, or at least that's what you think. And that's where I found myself. No direction, no information, and more than once I was left hanging by my boss. And for a while, I was blaming my boss, and I thought that the problem was just them. And it wasn't. It was how I was managing the relationship. And I'll tell you what I realized and how I handled it on the other side. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalysts. I'm your host, Shanita B. This is where we discuss how a thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at life's crossroads can become the catalyst for meaningful change in your leadership and life's direction. So, the shortcut to the problems that we face is simply just to blame someone else, as if we are helpless and have no influence over the situation. But we know that that's not true. And it definitely has some uncomfortable consequences when we come to that realization. What I'm going to do is refer you to last week's episode about your power and choice, because it's definitely worth a listen if you haven't had an opportunity to check that out. But when you look at your work circumstances and wonder why your relationship with your leader is stagnant and why there seems to be this incessant tension and misalignment, well, then you got to remember that there are at least two people in that relationship and you are one of them. And I don't want this to just be focused simply on you and your leader, because as a leader, if you have a team, how you're engaging with your leader is also going to dictate and influence really how you interact and engage with your own team. And so the very things that you may be focusing on and having issues with your boss, your team might be having that same issue with you. So I just want you to be aware of that. And this was part of what I realized in my own working relationships with a particular leader. And I've had this happen a couple of times, but I could not compel them to change their behavior, right? We just don't have that kind of power. But what I could certainly influence was being proactive in managing the relationship with them. And while we're on the note of managing, I just want to quickly share with you that if you are in a season where you're ready to take more control, especially as it relates to your finances, I'm hosting a live virtual workshop called She Leads Her Money. And I'm looking forward to sharing and connecting with you. So be sure to check out the details in the show notes and let's get connected. Okay. And if also, I just want to bring to your awareness that if this is really something that's resonating with you, I want to hear about it. So there's a voicemail link on my website at crossroadsandcatalyst.com. So make sure that you hit that so that you can share your thoughts or some things that you want to work through. Okay, so let's jump into this particular topic, because really what I'm talking about is managing up. And we hear that terminology, but sometimes I think definitions get a little skewed. So when I say managing up, how I'm defining that is what happens when you effectively lead the working relationship for both you and your boss to succeed. Okay. This is not about you doing your boss's work. This is not about you trying to hand off your work to someone else. This is about you showing initiative to manage this relationship so that you can get out of it what you need to do your job, and so that you can provide whatever it is to your boss that they need, because both of you will be happier in the end. And so you want to actively shape how the relationship works, how you communicate, how you align, and what you do to move that work forward. Okay. So, as an example, this actually played out for me in a way that's not uncommon, right? Because a lot of people experience this. I was given some high level direction, which in typical circumstances, it would have been enough. But what I wasn't told in this circumstance was that there was an underlying culture at play. So it was going to be a bit of a challenge for me to carry out this particular task and manage it appropriately without having this bit of information. So think about it. There's theory and then there's practice, or more specifically, there's written policy and then there's precedent. I was told to enforce the policy, but what I wasn't told was that the precedent that everyone had expected me to follow, it didn't match. And so of course I didn't come off looking all that great because I didn't understand the context. I did exactly what I was instructed to do. And I ended up looking like I didn't know what I was doing. I ended up looking like the problem. And at the same time, I didn't know any better. And just to give a little bit more information, I wasn't reprimanded, but what I walked away feeling was frustrated. And if I'm being honest, I felt a little incompetent because nobody wants to get instructions, think that they understand what it is that they're supposed to do, and then realize, oh, wait, there's something that's missing here. And I definitely hate feeling that way. And I know that you do too. But when I look back at that situation, it could have been avoided if I had asked better questions. And some of you are probably thinking, well, why would you have to ask more questions or better questions? Well, because when you reach a certain level within your career, there's an expectation that you are going to ask for what you need. And yes, I don't care how long or how new or how old you are to an organization. When someone passes information along to you, there's an assumption that you know some things. Even if you don't, there's an assumption. We don't want to pretend like we know things, but sometimes we're put in those situations where you're not even sure that you don't know something. You don't know until you realize that you don't know, right? So it wasn't just what's the policy, but what is the practice actually been? That was a question that I could have asked. Or what is the team used to seeing and experiencing in this particular context? Sometimes the gap is not in the instructions. It's in the context that you didn't even ask for. So we have to have an awareness that there are other things that are at play that we have to try to understand and pull some of that information out because people get busy. They're trying to clarify something or explain something to you, and things that are like second nature to them, they can't remember all of the details to share with you. So you don't know that something is missing until you get to a certain point in the conversation and the process. And then you realize, oh, wait a minute, I need some additional information. And that was the moment where I had to make a decision because it wasn't enough for me to complain about it. I could have kept operating at face value and remained frustrated. And believe me, I was, because that was not the only situation where that had happened. Or I could look at it differently and I could start asking better questions and managing the relationship in a different way. And so I'm pretty sure you understand what direction I'm headed in. And while that sounds good in theory, what does that look like on a day to day basis? Because if you're going to lead the relationship, you want to have an idea as to how you're going to go about doing that so that again both you and your leader can be successful. And not only that, you as a leader and your team members can be successful because you would want to help them to sharpen their skill set in that regard as well. So you want to ask, what are your expectations for X, Y, and Z? And sometimes what they provide to you is not going to be clear. They may not be able to clearly articulate what it is that they need. And that might depend upon the complexity of the situation, but you're going to have to figure out what it is that they need. And that sometimes means that you're going to have to pull out that decoder ring and piece the message together. And this is also a skill. And this will help you and lead you to ask more targeted questions. And a lot of people skip this and then they wonder why they're misaligned because you're not taking the time to really try to understand what is it that is necessary for me to carry out these instructions and take it and run with it. Healthy managing up, it's going to start with understanding. You have to be on the same page. So you need to find out, what does your leader actually care about right now? What does success look like to them? These are just some basic questions. And you're probably going to ask them many times in many different situations applied to different contexts, right? And then what kind of pressures are they under that you may not even see? So you have to ask yourself what may be going on that you're not even privy to. And then how can you address those things? You're going to have to learn to anticipate what they need in the same way that you would want your team to learn to anticipate what you need. Because once you work in a certain industry, a certain organization for any length of time, you really start to understand how a person communicates, how they talk, the lingo, what they're looking for. It takes some time to get there, but you can get there. But I want you to remember that you cannot align to expectations that have never been clarified. All right. So then the second thing is you want to communicate for impact. All right. This is where a lot of you high performers get stuck because you're communicating, but you're not necessarily doing it in a way that's effective. Maybe you're focusing on the process rather than the payoff. I cannot tell you how many times I've had direct reports come to me and they want to walk me through all of the steps to complete a task. Well, I don't need to know all the steps to complete the work. I just want to know what's the finished product? What is the result? What is the outcome? If you bore me half to death, I'm going to stop you and I'm going to say, okay, I just need the end result. So make sure that you're sharing that this is the goal. This is what I'm delivering. Unless you need them to assist you with the process itself, focus on the outcome. Okay. And in some instances, maybe the boss is going to want that. And even when you try to focus in on the actual goal itself or the outcome itself, they might start backtracking, or maybe they don't understand how you got to that. And maybe you have to go into that detail, but start at the highest level first and then work your way back. It's basically like you're going to reverse engineer it. Okay. You don't want to have to go into those details if it's not necessary. And sometimes if they don't understand, okay, you maybe it's just the person. Some of us, yes, we have bosses who do not always understand, and they may be a little void of understanding some things. You're going to have to work through that. You're still going to have to figure out how to manage that relationship. Learn to speak their language to help them to understand. Okay. So in a situation like this, the healthy managing is going to look like, okay, I need to frame this giving updates around the outcomes, not the actual work. And when it comes to problems that I might be encountering or that I need to address, maybe you should be focusing on, not maybe, you should be focusing on the solutions and not just the problems. All right. And then also remember, it is so important to be concise and clear, especially if your leader is stretched thin and you are probably stretched thin too. So it behooves you to be as concise and clear as possible. If keep it pithy, right? Nice and short and sweet. Because your job is not just to do the work. It's really to make sure that your work is understood, that you know how you need to prioritize it, and that it's actionable. Okay. So then, third, you want to make sure that you take ownership of the gaps. And you want to do this without overdoing it. Okay. And one thing I want to call out here is that everything is not going to be explicitly stated, which is why there are gaps in the first place. Information gets passed along, some details are left out, and then you're left trying to figure out how to piece this together to deliver on what it is that's necessary. So this is where some of this nuance comes in. And yes, you step up, but you don't have to carry everything and remain silent about it. So in a situation like this, when you're managing up in a healthy way, you're proactively asking for clarity when something is missing. And you can just come at it from this perspective. This is what I understood from this situation. Is that what you meant? Or is that what you intended? Just put it out there and ask the question and you start the conversation. Things should begin to get clearer as you go through that process. And then you also want to reconfirm the priorities instead of just guessing. It doesn't help you to guess if there's an opportunity to get some clarity about it. And then you want to name when you're having issues, when you're being blocked and that wall is being put up, you're trying to get information from other departments. You want to address that, and you want to do it in a constructive way. You do not want to come in looking like the complainer who doesn't get anything done and who always needs the boss to step in, because just like you and your direct reports, you don't want them to come to you with everything. You want them to be problem solvers. You are a problem solver. So when you talk about whatever issues you might be encountering, talk about them in a way that indicates that you are a willing team player to help to resolve it, right? And so, again, I want to remind you, managing up does not mean that you are doing your leader's job. It just means that you're refusing to stay stuck when something is unclear. Okay. And this is not a workaround. Managing up is not a workaround. It is a leadership skill. You have to know how to do this, because you're not going to have, in most instances, the same boss for 30 years. You're going to move companies, or you're going to change departments, and you're going to have to deal with different personalities. Some people are going to be a lot easier to communicate with than others. And so you have to learn how to navigate that. Just like when you're engaging with your team, they have to learn that about you. And part of that is just talking about it openly. You you don't we don't want to be vague and obscure when we're engaging with our team members and with our bosses. That just, it helps no one. All that does is cause frustration and confusion, and you're just worn out at the end of the day because you can't get the information that you need, because you're stuck in this state of flux. Okay? So again, the focus is to have a healthy relationship, not only with your boss, but with your team. Because again, what you're experiencing with your boss, you may be inadvertently doing the same thing to your team. All right. So as you're managing up in a healthy way, you're creating visibility, not resentment. And you're building partnership, and you're collaborating, not building a dependent or codependent type relationship. And then you're also maintaining boundaries, because this is really important. As I mentioned earlier, this is not you taking on additional responsibility. This is you showing initiative, showing that you have the skill to be proactive and work to the successful goal. Okay? And also, I want you to understand that if you're managing up and it's unhealthy, it's going to look like you over explaining and overworking, and you're overcompensating in some areas to try to come up to make up for some shortcomings, your boss's shortcomings, right? Or maybe you're avoiding some of the hard conversations, and you certainly don't want to be the one who's fixing everything in the back and making everything look like it's great, because what happens is people continue to pile on to you, and you don't want that. You are never going to have a perfect leader, and you're never going to be a perfect leader. But what you can do is have an awareness as to how you're engaging with your leader and with your team. And you want to put forth the best that you can in both of those situations. I think that that's really important. So before you walk away frustrated with your leader this week, I want you to ask yourself, where am I being led? And, or maybe you're not being led, but you're waiting for this person to lead you instead of actually leading the relationship, because you do have some say so in that. Just like I did in the instances where I was trying to figure it out, and I was just thinking, okay, well, is this person going to tell me something? No, I had to I had to get up and start asking some questions because I wanted to get the job done and I wanted to get it done well. And I knew that if I waited, I was going to continue to encounter some problems. And I didn't want that. And then also ask yourself, are you doing the same to your team? It is going to take some practice to build this skill. And if you would like to talk through this one on one, then click my calendar link in the show notes and we can talk about it. And before I forget, we're talking about sharpening skills, okay? I want to hear what other topics you'd like to discuss and focus on in a future webinar. So hit the mic icon on my website, crossroadsandcatalyst.com, or you can send me an email at connect@crossroadsandcatalyst.com and let me know because I'm gathering some information for the next webinar that I'm going to do. And be sure to hit the follow button in whatever app that you're using to listen to the podcast so that you will always get the latest notifications when episodes are published. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, be thoughtful, be wise, be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. I'll talk to you next week.